I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hold on a second. All right, so welcome to the Coordinated Human Service Mobility Plan FY25 Regional Coordination Meeting for the Tidewater region. My name is Jess Maffey. I'm the Transit Programs Manager for the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation, and I manage the 5310 program here. So just a bit of housekeeping. Please remain on mute for the presentation. I've got a couple of moderators here. One is Grace from DRPT, and they're going to help me out with any muting or admitting people. But just so you know, I will pause once for questions. And at that time, if you want to, you can use the raise hand feature that Teams provides if you'd like us to call on you, or you can always put your questions in the chat and we'll address them at that time. There will also be an interactive portion at the end of this meeting, and at that time I'll actually have a list of all of you, and when I call on you, you can unmute. And at that time I'll also invite you to turn your cameras on when you're introducing yourself, but you're welcome to have them on or off for the presentation. This webinar and each regional webinar is being recorded. DRPT will post the recordings on our YouTube page and send them out to all registrants. You will actually receive recordings for every regional CHSM meeting. So if there's a region that you overlap with, you will actually get that other meeting as well, although they are all fairly similar. You will also receive these slides with the links embedded. So you'll see as we go along, there's several places where you can click into the slides and access some resources there. So you will receive these, and again, as well as the slides, it's the same presentation for all the meetings, so you'll get that. And finally, this meeting, if you are a human services agency that's applying for 5310, this meeting does count toward points on your FY25 application. I will have the list of registrants. So if you registered, there's no need to worry about that. I've got you. Moving on to slide 3, getting into the meeting agenda. After this slide, we're going to do a quick group introduction in the chat, and I'll give you some more instructions on that here in a minute. Next, we're going to get into, on a high level, what is a CHSM plan. I know there's some people who are familiar with this process in the plan and some people who may be brand new. So I just wanted to go over the federal requirements and the format of the plan and how and why DRPT creates the plan. And then I'm going to get into the 2022 version of the plan, which is the most recent version, which includes really the 2019 plan, as the 2022 plan is an update from that plan. So we'll kind of go through the creation of both of those and what's changed. And then we'll also talk about how DRPT and you all can use the plan. Then we're going to get into an introduction to the CHSM story map. So this is going to be an online interactive version of the plan that we've created this year. It's new. And my coworker Grace is here, and she will be introducing that part of the presentation, showing you how to use that. And we'll get into the action tracker items in more detail. Finally, as I mentioned at the end, we will have a brief interactive roundtable where you can all introduce yourselves to each other and talk about if you are applying for 5310 funding, what you're thinking about applying for. Going to slide 4, if you're following along, I'm now going to give you all a few minutes to introduce yourselves in the chat. If possible, if you can please group all this information together into one message, we'll be copying and pasting it into a master list. So if you wouldn't mind, please share your name, your title, the organization you're with, where you're located, and your email address. This contact information is going to go out to everyone in the group. So if you don't feel like sharing it, that's fine. But it's meant to be a resource for everyone. So let's just take a minute and get those contacts in the chat for us. All right, I see some messages coming through into the chat. Thank you for putting those in there. I'll let anyone else who's still working on it just finish up and move on to the presentation. All right, so going to slide 5. First, I want to talk about, what is the CHSM plan? The Coordinated Human Service Mobility Plan is a federal requirement as part of the FTA Section 5310 program, and DRPT is the lead agency for developing this plan for most of Virginia. So the FTA requires that DRPT creates a plan that assesses current services and transportation needs of seniors, which are defined as individuals 65 years of age or older, and people with disabilities. It also identifies strategies to address service gaps and sets priorities for project implementation. This is a kind of a high-level document that provides statewide strategies, and then it kind of drills down into some goals and action items that help address and move forward those strategies and address the gaps in transportation needs for these populations. So that's really the high-level purpose of this plan. The urbanized areas of Northern Virginia around Washington, D.C. are included in a plan that's developed and maintained by the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. So MWCOG receives funding to support localities in Northern Virginia. So any locality that COG receives funding for is not eligible for funding through DRPT. And there are a few specific localities that have funding available through both COG and DRPT if their service areas cross localities. I'm not sure that's something that's relevant to your region, but just worth mentioning that MWCOG does maintain the CHSM plan and a separate application for 5310 for Northern Virginia. Going on to the next slide, 6. So the FTA requirements for the plan. According to federal regulations, the CHSM plan has to include input from the people it serves, which includes individuals with disabilities and seniors. It also is meant to include input from representatives of the public, private, and nonprofit transportation agencies, human service providers, and other members of the public in the state. There's a strong focus at the federal level on coordination and collaboration. The plan is meant to bring together all the stakeholders in an area to ensure that individuals who need transportation are getting it and services are not being duplicated within an area. So when we talk about coordination strategies or collaboration, there's a big emphasis on that in this plan, and that's really coming straight from the FTA. They really want to see agencies and areas working together to sort of provide a united front on this. In terms of the schedule of how this plan is updated, it follows a federally mandated update schedule with a minor update every 3 years and a major update every 6 years. So we just completed and are presenting on the minor update, which includes updated demographics data, inclusion of some new survey results, and updates to the action tracker strategies that are based on those survey results. So that's the 2022 update, which was just released. So the 2019 was the last major update, and the next major update is going to be 2025. So that will be a much more thorough sort of public outreach process to create that plan. Just getting into the plan format, the CHSM plan is one document that covers the entire state outside of Northern Virginia. It provides a summary of statewide demographics, available transportation, needs and gaps in human services transportation, and strategies to address those gaps. It also contains regional elements that address the unique challenges, needs, and goals of a single region. So we right now are in the Tidewater region. We're meeting with just the agencies that serve this region. And you are part of one of 6 regions, which that is how we divide up the state, which is really was started in 2019, that way of organizing the statewide regions. The plan really helps demonstrate that statewide challenges, as well as regional challenges. So it kind of does the high level state and then getting into each region's issues. I just want to point out here on the right this is an image of the cover of the PDF version of the plan. And anywhere you see this little click button icon, that's where when you get these slides, you can click into this and you'll be able to access the PDF, which is available on our website right now. So that's there for you. And this is how we've traditionally put out the plan as a PDF, and we will continue to do so. But also this year, we've built an online story map version of the plan. So if you're not familiar with a story map or don't really know what that means, we're going to walk you through it today. Basically, it's a function that you can create through ArcGIS that allows you to present a narrative document while also embedding data into maps to give much more in-depth detail into the data. So we're excited about that, and we're going to get into that in a little while. Moving on to slide 8. So getting into the 2022 update a little further, to do that, we first have to go back to the 2019 plan. Since this was just an update, not an overhaul, the basis of the plan today is very much the same as it was in 2019. So just to recap the creation of the 2019 plan, in case you weren't around for that, the 2019 plan identified 6 regions that follow the Department of Medical Assistance Services, or DMAS's regions for Medicaid providers. So you can see here at the top, this is the DMAS map. And on the bottom is the CHSM map and how we've divided up the regions. So we're here now in the Tidewater region, and you can see that the lines follow along just with the DMAS map. And it was meant to be sort of a familiar way of dividing up the state by regions for Medicaid providers. The 2019 plan also conducted a survey or a study involving surveys, interviews, ride-alongs, and public outreach meetings that identified the statewide needs and gaps in services. So that was a pretty extensive study that involved a lot of public outreach. It also identified underserved populations beyond 5310, so populations that could also benefit and often overlap with the eligible populations for 5310. It identified gaps specific to each region and recommended strategies through an action tracker. So that action tracker is, if you're have applied for 5310 in the past, that's what you reference on your application, and we're going to talk about in detail. And then finally, it identified major statewide recommendations for coordination across all groups, including for DRPT. So this plan is, not just meant for human services agencies, but it's really meant for any groups that work to serve this population, and including for DRPT at the state level. Going on to slide 9. So getting into what we have today, the 2022 update to the plan. As I mentioned, it built off the 2019 plan. We use the same regions, the same general populations and providers, but we provided updated demographic information using the most recent census data. It now includes a rider survey and a provider survey. These were 2 separate surveys that DRPT conducted with assistance from a VCU master's group with urban planning. And they helped us conduct and analyze those surveys, and those results are within the plan. Based on the rider survey results in particular, a new category was actually added to the action tracker, and I'm gonna touch on that today. And then, of course, we added a public-facing story map version of the plan to our GIS library. And just on the right here, this is kind of the landing or home page for the story map. This is what you'll see when Grace brings you through it in a minute. But I just wanted to note that the story map is an exact replica of the PDF copy. It has all the same information included, all the narrative, writing, everything, but it includes interactive maps with data that you can dig further into than in a static PDF. And also just wanted to note that following along with the PDF, each of these sort of picture blocks represent a chapter of the plan. So it really is the exact replica, just in an interactive format. Okay, going on to slide 10. I'm going to pause here on this slide for a little while and just talk through this a bit. And this is really, how want to go into a bit how DRPT uses the CHSM plan, and then how we recommend you use or think about the CHSM plan. So DRPT uses the CHSM plan to guide its investments in Virginia's transportation services that are designed to meet the needs of seniors, individuals with disabilities, and other priority populations. Seniors and individuals with disabilities being the eligible population to be served by the 5310 program. This plan is meant to be a living document that can be updated on an ongoing basis to account for changes in technology, new transportation challenges, and transportation successes. We expect our grantees to take an active role in implementing projects that advance mobility for all Virginians, and will continue to support these projects to the best of our ability. This plan does not prescribe funding, nor will there be sufficient funding through our programs to fund every recommendation. And this is always a part of the 5310 application, but we always say, organizations working in this field should continue to explore funding opportunities with other local, state, and federal agencies to make sure that, you're not only relying on DRPT for these funds. Getting into a little bit more about how you all should use the plan, there's a couple of sort of high level recommendations here at the top, and then kind of getting down to a little bit more practical, how you could use the plan for your application recommendations here at the bottom. So first, going through the plan, if you're reviewing it, reading through it, or just looking at your region, the idea is that some challenges or opportunities may stick out to you based on what you know about your region, your partners, or your potential partners. The first bullet there says that the plan identifies statewide and cross-regional challenges. This plan really demonstrates that a problem in one area is likely a problem in another area. There just may be a few different types of obstacles in each region. So just to give a few examples of things that came up as statewide challenges, and these will probably sound very familiar. There are long driving distances in rural areas. Whether you're in Southampton Roads or Big Stone Gap, you're not going to avoid driving long distances in rural areas. Just in Hampton Roads, you might have things like tidal flooding, as opposed to mountains and heavy snow in Big Stone Gap. So that's one similarity across the state, just looks slightly different. Another one is that public transportation doesn't always cross locality lines. There's examples out there of residents getting off at the end of a transit route and having to walk that final mile or however long it is to get to something like a medical facility. There is an example that was not a 5310 project of a collaboration between WADA and Hampton Roads Transit with this, where they were able to form a cooperation and use a federal grant to connect two bus lines to one such clinic. So again, not 5310, but it is the sort of collaboration and coordination we're talking about. That's two agencies coming together to solve a similar problem. Another issue that we see across the state is that the cost of transportation is prohibitive for some individuals, particularly for those who need more than one trip every now and then. So low-income individuals who don't own a car but still need to get to work, or someone who needs dialysis 3 times a week and lives in a rural area. These can be very expensive rides, and everyone looks for solutions to try and make those more accessible. The plan also provides ideas for how agencies can seek out different sources of funding and or collaborate with other groups to provide services. So one of these suggestions is, seeking out additional or different federal funding, but it could be under a different applicant. So this could be FTA programs that DRPT is applying for. It could be a provider that's applying for federal funding, or a planning district commission. And if they're applying for funding that could help with human services transportation, seeing if that's something that you could coordinate on. It could also look like coordinating across state and federal programs. So this could look different for different groups and agencies, but one example could be, community services boards that receive general funds through the State Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services. And if they use some of those funds for transportation, there could be opportunities for DRPT to work with that state agency or other state agencies to consolidate funding for transportation. And again, this is something that sort of brings up the point of it's not all on you all, and we're not, this plate is not meant to be putting everything on just human services agencies to come up with solutions. This is also something that DRPT can look into, or you can bring to our attention to say, hey, this state agency, maybe, you know, you all could collaborate and come up with a better solution for this funding. Another one here is the use of TNCs, or transportation network companies. I know this is something that many are familiar with now in transit, and you know, we've got Uber and Lyft out there, but there's also other companies such as Userve who are providing different types of transit. So the example here is in Richmond. GRTC is using Userve to augment its paratransit service, and it provides a different kind of service, but it's one they're still happy with, and it still meets FTA's requirements for public transit providers. So DRPT, you know, this isn't, none of these are a one-size-fits-all solution. It's not going to work for everyone. Depends what's in your area. But DRPT is interested in the use of these kind of companies or other, you know, use of technology where in areas where transportation is more challenging. Next up, to go down a little bit to the practical level, the plan is, this is particularly for agencies that are planning on applying for 5310 funding. It's meant to help guide you to understanding what DRPT is interested in funding. As I said before, it does not prescribe what we fund, as in if you have a project that doesn't perfectly align with the strategy or action item in the plan, it's not like your project is going to be ineligible or rejected, but it does help you get a more in-depth picture of what we have identified as important in each region, and we indicate in each region what we consider a priority action item. Plus, when you do apply and fill out your application, you will have to fill out a couple of questions about the plan, including indicating which goals that your project ties to. So at a bare minimum, you know, you should be reviewing those action items and just thinking about how your work ties into this plan overall. Finally, a part of the plan is these meetings to bring groups in your region together to meet each other and hopefully, you know, at least put some faces and names together to potential partners. It's certainly not the only way to collaborate, but it's at least once a year that we can bring together folks in the region to meet each other and just do a brief introduction, particularly because I know, again, many people have been around a long time and there's a lot of new faces like my own. So with that, we're going to move on to Grace's introduction of the CHSM plan itself. So Grace, if you want to take over and introduce yourself.
I'm going to share my screen, but I am Grace Stankus. I'm a statewide transit planner at DRPT, and I assisted Jess with the 2022 update of the CHSM plan, mainly putting it into the story map format. And so that's what I'm going to go over. Oh no, okay. Can you all see my screen? Okay. So I know Jess sent the link to the story map in these meeting invites, and then of course, once you receive these slides, you'll be able to click in here, but I'm going to go through another way that you can access the plan. If you go onto DRPT's website, drpt.virginia.gov, and you go over to our grant programs, down to the third on the list, Human Services Grant Program, and click that. This will bring you to the Human Services grant page, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, and it has a lot of information for the application. But if you scroll down this under application resources, this second link, the 2022 CHSM plan here is the PDF version, and then the third link is the story map. And so I'm going to click that. And that brings us to sort of like the main home landing page. As Jess mentioned, this is the same content as what is in the PDF version. It just looks a little different. And I'm just going to go over some of the functionalities and some of the ways that this differs from the paper version. And so I'm going to click into the statewide profile. Here, the narrative is, the same as what is on the PDF version, but as you scroll down and we get into the demographics, we have an interactive mapping portion where we have the statewide demographics for seniors and for populations with a disability. And the neat thing about this that is very different than a PDF version is you can click in, and so we can get a pop-up with additional information from the latest census for how many people are in a certain area that have a disability or are seniors. And so this map is scalable, and you're able to zoom in to see it at the county level and then also at the census tract level. And so I'm going to wait for this to load. There's a lot of data here. And so you're able to click around and just sort of interact with the data in a different way. So we have the two main 5310 recipients, but then we also have included demographic data for other groups that, or other characteristics that can impact mobility. So we have population and poverty, which to view the map demographics for that, you'll just click this button. And the same thing, the map is scalable and you can click in and out to kind of get a better idea of the population in certain areas. We also have zero car households, same thing, just click on to see that data. We've also included a vulnerable populations index, which was created from a previous DRPT study, and it groups vulnerable populations and creates an index to come up with areas that have the highest vulnerability. And then we finally we have veterans, internet and technology access. And so these are just kind of neat ways to learn more about the populations and just interact with the data. And so when you're done, more of like a functionality piece of this, when you're done in a specific chapter, you can click out and into a new chapter either by using these buttons up here that I'm highlighting, or you can go up to this main sort of collection of squares to bring you back to the home screen, and then you can click into a different chapter that way. And so I'm going to go into the action tracker chapter. And again, like the PDF, we have the narrative and the definitions of all of the identified gaps here. And so you can just click around to learn more about those and get a better idea. Or you could just click directly to the action tracker, which this has the same information as the table in the PDF plan, but it's a little bit more interactive in that you're able to select by gap, by transportation gap, or by goal. And so, say trip availability is a gap that you're looking to sort of include in your application, you can click this gap and it will just show the action items associated with that particular gap. And so same thing with goal. If your goal is to improve rider experience, you can click that and just see the action items associated with that. And so this is just kind of a different way to view these action items as you're working through your applications. And so one final thing to share is we have created these regional profiles for each of the 6 regions throughout the state. And I think this will be helpful as you work through your applications. So we have the regional profile, which again is similar to how it looked in the 2019 plan, but we have just added, a different layer here on the story map where you can see the transit service once this loads. And so clicking this button will display just the transit service that is available in the Tidewater Chisholm region. And I think this is cool for any sort of coordination efforts, just to see who's operating what and where they operate. And so you can click around just to learn more about who's operating, what kind of service they operate, and where they're operating as you kind of work together. And similarly to the statewide profile, as you scroll down in the region, we also have the senior population demographics, but again, this is just for the Tidewater region. We have population with a disability. And again, the pop-ups work the same as they did in the statewide profile, where you can zoom in or out to get a different scale. Here it's showing the census tract, but if we go out, it will show the county. And we also included these demographics that were, again, in the statewide profile, but these are just at the region level. So we have the population in poverty, veteran status, vehicle, internet, technology access, and then the vulnerable populations index. As you continue to scroll, there are the regional issues, which are kind of where the transportation gaps and challenges came up from the outreach, both from the 2019 plan and the outreach conducted for the 2022 plan, the surveys that Jess was mentioning earlier. And this is the same table as in the PDF. It just kind of shows, things that repeatedly came up as issues in the Tidewater region. And so these are a good resource as you're working through your application. And finally, in the profile, we have what we've called high priority action items, which again, this is just things that repeatedly came up in these surveys and when talking to providers and riders, just as big issues sort of in the area. And so these we've kind of highlighted as things to maybe focus on your application if it fits in with your program. But yeah, this is just a resource that you can use as you're working through your application. And finally, we just have a link to that action tracker that I went over before. And so I realized this was a lot of information. I'm available for any questions should you have any. Jess, you're muted.
Yep, sure enough. All right. So unless you have any questions about kind of, oh, okay, Paul, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you. This is a great tool. Really excited to see this shared. I particularly appreciate the other demographic elements that it delves into, such as veteran status, because Eggleston is here to support vets as well. So thank you so much for introducing this tool, and I know it'll be a use.
That's great. Yeah, I'm happy to hear that. Yeah, hopefully you can use this beyond just the DRPT's program. You can use it for other things that your agency works on. So that's great to hear.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and go through the action tracker in a little more detail, and then we will pause again for questions if you guys are thinking of things. So give me 1 second here. All right. Just gonna pick up where Grace left off and go back to the action tracker. So I really just want to go ahead and get into the statewide action tracker to give you a fuller picture of the gaps and goals we're looking at. As you saw when we went into each region, that we've identified those priority action items for each region. But ultimately, if you're applying for 5310 and you're filling out your application, your project should really align with any of these goals or action items, not necessarily just the ones identified in your region. If you don't identify with any of the priority ones in your region, that's not going to be, you're not going to be eliminated or anything like that. It's just letting you know, again, what DRPT's priorities are. So I am going to go ahead and read through each one of these items. which should hopefully give you a good idea of how we're thinking about these gaps. However, you can always, go back through and read the chapter here for a more in-depth explanation of how we came up with those and where they came from. I also do want to mention here that it doesn't matter how many action items, again, if you're applying for 5310, it doesn't matter how many action items you're listing. It really is more about quality than quantity. We just want to see that you can justify how you align your project with an action item. So if your project is just addressing one, just make sure that you have that solid connection between what we're looking for here and what your project is doing. So I'm going to go ahead and read through all these. The first transportation gap we identified was trip availability. The goal related to that being expanding service availability. And this includes expanding after hours transportation service, increasing the availability of long distance trips, and expanding trip types to better meet rider needs. Onto the second gap, trip accessibility. The goal here is, the pretty basic one that we're all kind of working with is providing transportation to seniors and people with disabilities who cannot use it, or, and I'm going to scroll over here, which just to show you this function, who live in an area where public transportation is not provided. This could also include enhancing scheduling, making it, easier for people to find and schedule with you. And it could also be exploring the feasibility for expanded door-to-door service. So if that's something that your agency is looking at doing or needing more of that or getting more of that service requested, maybe that's something you could look to do with your project. Under the transportation gap, trip reliability, I'm actually going to pause here because this was the new gap that was identified as part of the 2022 plan update. And when analyzing the survey results from riders specifically, we were finding that the idea of rider experience kept coming up a lot. And although it overlaps with some of the other categories here, it also seems to have its own nuance. So when we were looking at these surveys, riders would use words like reliability a lot, as well as things like cleanliness, friendliness of drivers, and talking about their experiences using technology to schedule, whether that was a good experience or a not so good experience. So the idea is that, if you're listing trip reliability or improving your rider experience on your application, that there's something about it. You may be overlapping again with another gap or goal, but there's something about your project that is kind of focused on that experience part. So under this one, the action items are implementing standardized education and training opportunities for operators to make sure they have the proper training and resources to provide aid. So, friendliness or the ability to help someone who needs it in a certain way. It could be client specific. Another action item is the possibility of increasing staffing so operators can better meet their passenger scheduling needs. So this is really where that reliability piece comes in. If we're all late or might have last minute things come up occasionally, but just making sure the clients feel like they can, or the public feels like they can rely on you. And then finally, exploring implementing improved public facing technology such as scheduling software that is meant to be user friendly. Again, this is not prescriptive. If this doesn't work for your project or your agency, that's fine. This is just something we're looking at as part of the rider experience that could be something that you're interested in. Under the gap of service alternatives, these are all meant to be expanding transportation options through, for the most part, partnerships. So we're looking at partnerships with public transportation providers. This could be, something with route efficiencies or modification that you could come together to, again, like solve a similar challenge. It could be partnerships with hospitals or medical centers. I know a lot of folks do that, seeing if they have needs that your agency can serve. Potentially partnering with community colleges or other education facilities, or even workforce development, to see if they have transportation needs that need to be met that you could help with. And then finally, again, continuing discussions with TNCs to determine how their role plays into human service transportation and if it's something that your organization's interested in pursuing. Under the coordination gap, this is the idea of increasing statewide and regional coordination. So this again is, not just on the partners on a local level, but it's also folks at a statewide level, including DRPT. So this could be working with your local jurisdictions to include human services transportation into local transportation planning. So I kind of think of that as like advocacy, making sure people know that you're out there and these services are needed. On the DRPT level, developing and maintaining statewide and regional advisory committees was something that came up from the 2019 plan to help with coordination. And this is this was started in 2019, but sort of fell by the wayside during COVID. It's something that we're thinking about. What would be the ideal outcomes or of having advisory committees like that. So that's in there for us as well. And finally, under coordination, continuing communications with organizations that are involved with statewide transportation, such as like CTAV, the Community Transportation Association of Virginia. There's also VAM, the Virginia Association of Mobility Managers. And there's, of course, other nationwide groups as well, but really trying to connect with people in Virginia who can support you in a variety of ways. Under education and training, there's a few different types of goals. This one, increase awareness of available service, is what I think of as the external goal of, focusing on outreach to your served population or people who may not know you exist. So trying to get into different kinds of facilities to see if, you can make your services accessible or bring more people in. Or it also could be, if you're a client-based service, if people are coming into your service or facilities, making sure they know that transportation is one of the services you provide. So just making it known you're out there and you're providing these services. And then on the internal side, providing education and training for staff and riders. So this could be, again, like beyond sort of the required general operator training, expanding training opportunities to make sure they have training and resources to provide aid to the passengers, like client-specific aid. So making sure they know how to do that. It could be setting standards for standards for training for your providers or mobility managers or other staff. And it also could be providing introductory travel training for new riders. So again, this could just be something you're interested in and could use some 5310 funding for. Finally, under education and training, we included increased safety and preparedness. And that's just, the idea of we all went through the pandemic and having some of those things in place, hopefully in writing, to address any other issues that could come up. Finally, the last transportation gap is funding, and this is really what I consider the gap in the goal that sort of feeds into a lot of other ones, and that's increasing sustainable funding streams. So this could include increasing funding for labor, for your operators and staff. It could be exploring and applying for alternative sources of funding beyond 5310. So that could be, DRPT special grants, which occasionally come up, but also community grants, community foundations, or even nationwide funding sources. And finally, continuing to work with your local and regional government to see if they can support you in your endeavors in human services transportation. And again, the idea of kind of being that advocate to make sure they know what you're doing and how it's helping the community. Okay, so just went through all this. I'm going to go back to the presentation. Before we get into the roundtable of introductions, does anyone else have any questions? Or you can raise your hand to, and we'll call on you if you have any questions. Alrighty, just going to get back to my slides here. And I am on slide 13 if you are following along. All right, so not seeing any questions right now. I'm going to go ahead and start calling on folks to introduce themselves. If you would like to turn your camera on when you're speaking or right now, feel free to do so. We're meant to kind of just be introducing ourselves to each other. And what I'm going to do is I'll call on groups that I know first. So if I am pretty sure you're applying or have applied in the past 5310, I'll call on you. And then anyone else, well, sorry, 5310, if you'll please introduce your agency, talk a little bit about what type of funding you're planning on applying for, anything about your project you'd like to share. And then everyone else I'll call on, and you can say, if you are applying to 5310, feel free to say the same or just introduce yourself and your agency, and you can talk about any coordination you've done with any of these groups in the past. So getting started here, I'm going to first call on Hampton Newport News CSB, Jennifer.
Hi, everybody. This is Jennifer Small from Hampton Newport News CSB. So we are a community services board servicing Hampton and Newport News. We use our 5310 vehicles mostly for our group homes and our day programs for individuals that we serve that are elderly and disabled. So we have several vehicles through, and we are applying for more capital vehicles this year, just to continue to expand that, mostly replacement vehicles at this point. We've been doing this for a while, so we're coming around and just needing to replace more vehicles. So
great. Thank you, Jen, for coming. Next up, I've got Senior Services of Southeastern Virginia, Wanda. And if you're talking, we can't hear you. All right, I'm not seeing her in there, so I'm going to move on. Let's go to Eggleston, either Carlos or Paul, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, certainly. Good afternoon. My name is Paul Atkinson Jr., Vice President of Operations for Eggleston. We're a local not-for-profit that does a number of things. So mostly work opportunities, but we also have residential programs, and we're really interested in community engagement. So we'd love to connect and collaborate, and to that.
Oh, you muted yourself. Paul. There you go.
We're interested in collaborating. So to that end, I put links in chat. We'd love to connect. We're a past capital grant recipient, and I don't believe we'll be applying this fiscal year, but I want to stay in the conversation, and thank you for offering a seat at the table. My colleague, Carlos Baxley, is our new grants administrator. So welcome, Carlos, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Appreciate you coming. It's always great to have people. I know some folks kind of go away from 5310 and then come back around, so it's always nice to see people back. Next up, we got Peninsula Agency on Aging, Gerald.
Yep, hello. Yeah, I'm Gerald Pates on with Peninsula Agency on Aging, and we're a area agency on aging. We've gotten a recipient of grants for many, many years. We provide transportation mainly for seniors and individuals with disabilities to their non-emergency medical appointments, to our congregate dining programs, and to veterans who live on the peninsula and on the south side. So we'll probably be applying for operating for our veterans and maybe for our regular transportation. And I say this tongue in cheek, I guess we'll apply for another vehicle, although I'm sitting here waiting on 5 of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like everyone else is. So
exactly. Yeah. Well, keep on applying.
I
They'll
know.
come eventually. But yeah, appreciate it. Appreciate you
Okay.
coming. Thanks, Gerald.
Yeah.
All right, the next one is I have, I've got the City of Suffolk, Natoya Nelson, if you're here.
Yes, hi, good afternoon, everyone. I am Natoya Nelson with the City of Suffolk. We have our Suffolk Transit that provides services to mainly the City of Suffolk, but we do try to connect to the other, to HRT and to other localities as well. We were, we had 5307 and 5339 funding, but based on the recent census data, we are no longer going to be a part of that UZA. And so we're going to be funded through DRPT. I'm not sure if it is 5310 funding. So far, we do not have 5310 funding, but it's possible that we may be applying for it in the future. So I just wanted to be on here to get as much information as possible.
Great. No, thanks for coming, Natoya. I appreciate it. And yeah, I know that that's kind of been the case with a few different places, but yeah, we can help figure that out for you as well. All right, next I'm going to move on to Hampton Road Transit, Amy. I don't know if Amy's here, or I can't hear you if you're talking. Amy, I see your mic is unmuted, but I can't hear you. So if you'd like to drop something in the chat, I can read it for you. And just a brief introduction, I'm happy to do that. But I'm going to go ahead and move on right now to Hampton Roads Transportation Planning Organization. Jeff?
Yes, good afternoon. EHRTPO generally not an applicant in 53010, but we, excuse me, come back to me in a sec.
Come back to you, no problem. I will. Okay. Okay, so didn't want to say Natoya, so Steve Hennessy, one of my coworkers here, he did say the City of Suffolk will be getting 5311 funding. So it looks like you probably wouldn't be applying through our program, but still glad to have you here and to help with that. So thank you, Steve, for responding there. And I'm just gonna, I think that's all I have for right now. I'm just gonna wait a moment for Amy to put her thing in the chat and then I'll read that. Unless, okay. Okay, Amy from HRT said she's fairly new to the funding project process and certainly we are applying for new vehicles, potential for other projects. Okay, that sounds good, Amy. Thanks for letting us know, and I'm sorry that you're something's going on with your mic. We've had plenty of technological issues ourselves here, so no worries. And it looks like Jeff is finishing up a call, if you'd like to join us again. Jeff, you're good to introduce yourself if you'd like.
Yeah, thanks. I was sorry,
Okay.
having things going on at the house.
No worries, no worries.
Call.
Yeah.
HRTPO generally not an applicant, but we, as part of the application process, generally most applications will require a letter of support from the Regional Metropolitan Planning Organization.
Mm-hmm.
So our office will coordinate with applicants on that. And our only request is to try to open that door and get that started as soon as possible in your application process. So we can meet your timelines and keep you on schedule for submissions. You know, those letters generally would be addressed to our executive director, Robert Crum. but be processed by the programming team under John Mahaley and Kathleen Grauberger. But if you get those letters in as soon as possible, we appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate you sharing that with everybody. I know that's, there's a lot of moving parts to the application process, so it's always nice to meet the people who are behind some of it. All right, with all that, all those introductions done, I want to thank you all for doing those introductions, and just want to share a little bit more information about the 5310 process going forward, and for any other funding, this is relevant as well. So DRPT is moving to a new online grants management system called Web Grants for our FY25 applications. This is across the entire agency, and there will be a training hosted, or 2 trainings on October 30th and 31st. An email went out kind of through our general email blast earlier this week. When you get these slides, though, I will embed links to register for those. So you'll get that from me as well. And these are just 2 alternative dates. It'll be the same training, and that will get you registered in the system, since it is a new system for everybody. And then for anyone applying to 5310, the pre-application workshop will be on November 1st. I'll be hosting that workshop, and it will be recorded and sent out. So if you can't make it on November 1st, you'll get that as well. And I know that's something everyone looks forward to in terms of working on their applications. And then the FY25 5310 application opens on December 1st and closes on February 1st. So there, in that time frame, or even before then, if you want to reach out to Jeff for your letters, that's when you'll be wanting to do that. And finally, if you would like to connect with each other after this call, or really anyone else throughout the state, we are going to be sending out all the information you shared in the chats with each region. So you'll get everyone's names and emails. So just so you have that for yourselves as well. And finally, if you have any questions, I'm Jess. This is my email and phone number. I'm always happy to schedule a call or answer any questions. But yeah, unless anyone has any other questions, I'll go ahead and let you go with a minute to spare. And I appreciate you all coming out. So thank you very much.